that captures all your applications. So it centralizes all your applications into one location.
Right.
So in order for you to access, and let me log out for a moment so that I can kind of walk you through the entire process. So clearly this is XST0400. This is the production environment, and I'm logged in as an admin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And since this is being recorded or whatnot, I figured.
Yeah, for training.
I mean, we pretty much know the workspace, but you can like just go in and start doing the changes. We just kind of needed some other steps in there to slow it down.
So, and it's taking a year and a day.
It's pretty slow, yeah.
So Steele's going to fix it as soon as he gets. He's going to fix it as soon as he gets back to India. Him and Sadeep.
All right. Since I'm in New Jersey, it shouldn't be taking too long, right? Okay. So in order to access the FDMEE environment, you'll have to actually go into Navigate, Administer, and then Data Management. So why they call it Data Management and not FDMEE or Financial Data Quality Management Enterprise Edition, I don't understand. So in order to access your point of view, so a point of view is where you would like to run the integration. So it requires a location, a period, as well as a category, which in this case for us is called category. For planning, it's called scenario. So in order to access that, to give you your POV, we call it, you'll have to click onto the Data Load Workbench. Within the Data Load Workbench, and as you can see on the left-hand side, this is the control where you would run the batch as well as manually load data. So at this moment, we have a couple locations. And in order for you to choose a location, you'll have to click on this hyper. It's blued, where you can click on a link. And this link brings you to a point of view, hence point of view. Within this point of view, you can choose your category, as I mentioned, your period, as well as your location. Right now, we're going to go and choose the location for planning. Okay. So right now, this is an integration that utilizes a data sync integration, meaning that it's an EPM, Enterprise Performance Management, to an EPM application. So it's a synchronization between two applications. So I named it with the convention of ASO Conduit, which is where the source is coming from, and where we're going to load it to, which is to planning. So I'm going to click onto this location, and I'm going to change this to, let's say, August 2017. Okay. The category we're going to be running it for is going to be working forecast. That's where we're loading the data to. Okay. For HPCM, it's using a different naming convention, which is working forecast, but in planning, it's using a joined word, no spaces. It goes by different applications, I'm assuming, because certain applications will not allow spaces in there. So we have working forecast as one whole word. Okay. And now, this is a data load rule. The data load rule is pretty much an application that holds the data, or actually, it's a load rule that captures all the data. Sorry. Anytime a data load rule is deleted from the application, the data goes with it. Okay. So meaning that since FDMEE is a database-driven application, every time that you run an integration, it creates a process ID, and that process ID is associated with this data load rule. Now, anytime that, let's say, you have process IDs from 1 to 1,000 that was loaded previously for X amount of months, and you accidentally delete this data load rule, then all the data that is associated with that data load rule is not within the FDMEE repository. Hello? Did I lose someone? Or
we're still here. Keep going.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to choose the. This is the only data load rule for this location. Bring hiccup. Okay. So there's two types and two ways of executing an integration. it's either you can go through the manual integration, pulling the data, which is the import, and then once the data is validated, it goes and clears to validate. And this fish becomes a orange goldfish as opposed to a dead fish. And once this clears, you have the option of clicking on export, and this goes straight directly into planning. And once that is set. But in this purpose on this meeting, we're going through the process of pulling the data through ASO Conduit. So in order, and I think JP has a process where he is automating the DRM refresh of metadata. So to do so, you have to refresh the metadata before, if there was any changes to the metadata to reflect into planning, then that metadata needs to be refreshed so that FDME can pick it up from the repository. So to do so, it's going to take a little bit of time since it's a lot of mappings. So I'm not going to execute this at the moment, but I did execute it this morning in preparation. As you can see, I had ran the maps for headcount, I ran the maps for planning, and I also ran the map for depreciation, headcount, and regular planning. I think it's a little bit further down. But so I refreshed it, and a green check mark means good. A red X means no bueno, bad.
You refreshed from where to where?
I refreshed from the dev mappings into the production because we have only a dev environment that is being refreshed at the moment. We don't have a production where we're pulling the maps from. So just to give you an overview and go back to where the maps are being pulled, I'm going to go into the SQL database, and I'm going to show you where we're extracting the maps from. So the maps that are being pulled in is the accounting map, the entity, as well as the geography. Okay, and this is our stage planning location, pulling from, let me minimize this, from XSTDAL SQL DB01. Okay, so this is where we're pulling the maps from. Up until we get a refresh of the production maps, which is to these three tables, or views, sorry, then we'll have a larger list which will clear out the FDME validation, which is the mapping here, come on, here, validation, okay? So just to go deeper into this, so validation errors come about where there's data that is being pulled in, but there's no map provided so that it has a home to go to. So that's where this validation error comes into play. So if I was to take this, go into the validation error tab, and I copy this cost center from org, and I go into the SQL, and I basically paste and do a query on this mapping. Actually, hold on. Wrong, is it all? No. So if I execute this, oops, sorry. Wrong one. Should be, I don't think I refreshed this yet. Sorry. Let me refresh this right now. If I validate and click on OK, since I ran this integration probably a few weeks ago. So it's stale data at this moment. So I'm going to click on the validate since I just refreshed the maps. And when you go and refresh the maps, you can click on the import, and once it's done, it's going to go into the validate step. But at this moment, we have the data already pulled in, and I don't want you guys just sitting around and watching, waiting for water to boil. So I'm just going to go and validate the step. There's two options. You can either do it online or offline. I tend to like to do it offline since, actually, let's do the online for now, and then I can show you the process step. So what it does is that if you do it on the line, I have a process where it exports the validation errors into a flat file, which is an Excel. And it will give you a list of cost centers that has been rejected, per se. And it should only take a few minutes, so it's going to run. But this is the process where this is the manual process. And then there's going to be a automation process, and I will show you that shortly, as soon as this completes with the validation.
We ran through, I'll call it the monthly process, twice last week.
Okay.
You know, so we've seen the scripts that are built and ready to go in planning, but we always stopped at actually pulling data in. And that's
pulling data in as in?
Grabbing the actuals from ASO Conduit, grabbing the head count, grabbing the depreciation.
For one period or for multiple periods?
For anything. Our planning app right now has a snapshot of data from July.
From July, okay.
We have not refreshed it once.
Okay, so let's, in this case, let's take depreciation, or at least a head count or something. That's probably a smaller set of data. And let's refresh and go from point A to point B.
That would be awesome.
Okay, so hopefully head count is not too much, and we can run through it. So I'm also going to, I know that JP had mentioned that it was not executing multiple periods or multiple months. So as you can see, hit validate, a mapping missing maps pop-up is going to appear. And when we open this, it's going to, sorry, I have two screens, so it's going to, so it gives you a list of entities that are missing, okay? So when we refresh the maps again with production, then it should repopulate. So let's, so as you can see, you can pretty much take this, add it into production, and do a to and from maps, push down into DRM maps, and DRM will refresh FDME, and this map should not be there existing anymore. Okay, so let me run through a process of helping, or at least explaining multiple periods. It's going to take a little bit of time to run, but I'm going to show you. So right now, I put in a time control to run periods. So in order to get and change the time period to execute, let's say hypothetically for 2 months or 3 months or 12 months, we have a system location, and that system location holds all the parameters, all the variables. So if I was to go into system location, okay, the period as well as the category does not matter in this case. This is just only a controlled variable that we set within the system location, and you click OK to that, and it brings you into pretty much nothing's in here except for the mappings. So if you go into, there's no data load rule associated with it, there's no workbench that is associated with this systems location. There's pretty much an empty shell that is using it as a mapping location or a variable location with looking for. So in order to get there, we'll have to go into the data load mapping. And this is for HPCM, so we don't touch the script parameters in that location. But I've created a time control location. And this time location, a time control location, has and captures the beginning, the start month, as well as the end month if I can find it, yes, end month. So right now I have August to October running for the year of 2017 to 2017. So anytime that you would like to go and run multiple periods instead of the actual manual import of each month, you can run a range between X amount of months and another X amount of months. So just for testing purposes, I'm going to change for head count, okay? And I labeled head count as head count, and HC in front of it. Depreciation, which is waterfall, is depreciation. And the regular ASO conduit load is using just, or I can rename this to plan, batch, and month, or plan, just to kind of keep it all together. So I'm going to run the end month as, you want to throw out a month, Steve? You want me to run for July to August? Would that be good?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. And then let's say for the start month, let's say July. Okay. So once that's done.
If the start month is July, it ignores June and previous? It leaves it as is?
Right. So, I mean, the reason why I'm running this, right. So it doesn't, so it's running on a period that you're setting it as. So, so if, let's say if you want to run from January to December, you can run January to December and just type that in. Okay? Right now, for testing purposes, I just don't want you guys to sit around and wait for this integration to run. So once that is set, since this is the same year, same month, 1 month or 2 months, I'm going to click on Save, save location. Don't forget to save. Then I'm going to go into the batch execution. That's where it's set in place. And I'm going to execute for head count. So these are maps, which is the refreshing of the maps from DRM, dev environment, and you have also as well as depreciation. And then the rest of these I've put a description on running for planning head count as well as depreciation, which is here, as you can see, depreciation. So I'm going to go and run the data for head count, okay, and I'm going to execute. After executing, you're going to see a batch has been submitted successfully. I'm going to click OK for that, and I'm going to go into the process details. In the process details, you're going to see, and this is where the process log comes into play, how the integration is going to be running, where we know that it's going to error out on the validation step because we don't have new maps refreshed yet or updated maps refreshed yet. Since we're pulling data from the production environment, so there's going to be some kickouts. So we're going to refresh this and take a look and see. So the first integration is running, right? So we put in 2 months, which is July and August. So let's keep on refreshing this. Hopefully there's something that will come through. All right. So as you can see, this is called batch. The batch encloses X amount of periods that you're planning to run. So as you can see, July, if I click onto that integration that is within the batch, as you can see, we set the parameters where it's running July, and as you can see, it's pulling the data from July, right? So it should end on August. So hopefully, it finishes up faster. So at this moment, the data is being imported, okay, imported for July, and it transformed the data for July 2017, okay. So it's going to continue running for the range that I had put in. As you can see, it X'd out, okay, and I'm going to show you what the error log is, what this means, even though it imported data, but there is no home to where the data is being mapped to, and that's the reason why you have an X here. Once you clear the validation error, it should be a green check here. So let me go and show you right now. As this is running, I'm going to show you for July. You click onto the show, and there's going to be a pop-up that appears, and you click on open. It looks overwhelming, a lot of code, a lot of logging. But if you look for the word error, okay, as you can see, it says data rows with unmapped dimension exist for period July 2017. That's telling me that the mappings was not refreshed, and there's data that is within FDME, but that has no place to go. And FDME puts out a validation error and say, okay, what would you like to do with this? How would you like to do this? What would you like to do? And until the maps are updated, then this will not appear, and it will be successful. Okay. So questions?
Okay, but the other data that had a home was brought in.
So yes. So the mapping,
okay.
Yes. So the ones that we rejected, until everything clears out 100%, that's when FDME is going to clear and push it across into the step where it is the export step. Okay. But up until then, let's say out of 10 mappings, 8 of them were mapped and 2 of them fell through, then it's not going to clear until you correct those mappings.
Okay. So we can't update our data until we clear all these mapping errors.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. That's part of the process that we have. So as you can see, same thing as it applies for August, right? It transformed, it pulled in data, it imported data, and it transformed the data, but there was a handful that was also missing with the maps. So let me show you what I'm referring to. Let me go back into the data load workbench, and we select and change the point of view since I was at the system location to change parameters. We're going to go into the head count location.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to choose July since we were on August before, so just to show. Okay. Or you can click onto this magnifying glass and you can choose the period that you want to look at. Okay. Same as it goes for the point of view, location, hourglass, same thing. Click OK. So now you can see that there is, as you can see, this is a good example right here. We have a map that's coming in, which is a source, right, which is coming in from ASO Conduit for head count, but there's no map for it. So same as it goes for geography, okay? There's a count for this or cost center for this, but there's no mapping to it. Same as it goes for head count, same thing for head count, for geography.
Okay.
Okay.
So
I got a question. I have a quick question on that. That's basically telling me there is no future. So there's some data that's going to have the pre-existing cost center. What is it really telling me at this point when you're missing that? Yeah, what are you saying for that line right there? That cost center was existing previously in the mapping, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then now it doesn't have a future mapping to go to, right?
Right, that's correct.
Okay.
That is correct. So meaning that it's pulling in from ASO Conduit, but but there's no place, there's no home for this line of data to go to. But this line of data has a home to go to. You see the difference?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think if we can go back to DRM. These are basically the changes that happened this month, for example, right? We went and moved stuff around. And I'm trying to figure out another way for us to capture that so we don't run into this huge, there's going to be a huge gap there, you know?
Right. So same as it goes for geography, same thing.
Oh, okay. From your dimensions.
See that? Yeah. So it's the dimensions I'm pulling in for the mapping because these are one-for-one mappings, and that's what these are. Do you understand?
Okay.
So for this one, so this, as you can see, this is a source. This is a target, source, target, source, target, source, and they go and so forth and so on and so forth, right? But as you can see, there's no place for this to go. This, for example, right? So this one actually has a set of data that goes to it. So up until the point where we update the maps, then it's not going to go into planning at this moment. Even you can run this integration 15 times. It's not going to clear this validation to get into planning because there's no home for these for these mappings, this data. So the system specifically errors out so that you can fix your maps or you can apply your maps.
So we have a way to get the delta between the two of what last month and this month, and that might help us identify this before we get here. So we know what to expect. You know what I mean? The difference between last month and this month from each or each dimension. And if we isolate just what's in planning, we know specifically what to expect, the delta between this and this. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I think there's a way we can do it from another. But, I mean, this can be very time-consuming if you're having to go in here and literally work each and every one of those. You know what I mean?
Right. But the thing is that you can actually take an export. So you can take within Excel, you can take an export of this entire workbench, and then you can filter out on these target maps. So that's one of them. And let me show you another thing. Since it's pretty plain Jane, it's not rocket science in running the integration. I think JP had created a automation process around this to run multiple periods and whatnot. So let's say if whoever is administering FDME in the future, let's say you want to run for a full year, you'll need to make the update within the system location first, and then JP will need to run his, because the controlled variable environment is not within planning, it's within FDME, So the variable will need to change within, it's just that JP just has a batch script that executes this, and that's all it does. So the variable control is within the system here. So you click onto the location, you change this into system, and as I mentioned, time control, Update your periods that you want to run, and when JP or nightly batches that kick off, it will execute those X amount of, or the range of periods that you want it to run. So that's the only update that you make, and that's it. And usually with the refreshing, let me show you where the mappings are captured and where these mappings are deriving from. So I'm going to go into the data load mapping, Within the data load mapping, as you can see, there's multiple dimensions. There's a account dimension, and this is the planning dimension, a planning application dimension. So you have the account, currency rate, driver, fiscal year, blah, 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 blah. So the counts that we're actually pulling from DRM and refreshing this is the one-for-one. We call it explicit mapping. The explicit mapping means that it's a one-for-one. And the reason why we're not putting in a catch-all bucket is because we want it to error out, We don't want it just to pass it through, because if we just wanted to pass it through, then you guys don't get to control what's being passed through, and then missing maps the file that pops up that I showed you guys earlier. That does not work, because it's going to say, you know what, I'm just going to pass everything if it rejects on the explicit mappings, in which that defeats the purpose of missing maps. So this is where the maps are being held. When I refresh DRM mappings into FDME, it populates this account dimension, and also populates the org dimension. This is where your maps are, see? And there's, I don't want to go through it, but there's like, there's a lot of them. It's probably,
I can see that.
As you can see, the scroll bar on the right is just really long. It's huge.
I don't even want to know number.
But if you want to go and filter on which maps that exist, you can actually type in whatever map you want, and we can, and you can filter it out. And I think this is a good start. This is a good intro. There's no other maintenance that needs to be done with an FDME besides the refreshing of the maps and I think period's already done for that. It's good for the next, let's say, 10 years. So let me. So I updated the period mapping. So under that, it's under the Setup tab. In the Setup tab, it's called the period mapping, and the period mapping goes all the way up. Yeah, it goes on. I believe it's all the way up to 2020. There it is. 2020.
Okay.
Or a few years, 3 years. So up until then, maybe the system or application may upgrade or whatnot. So there's mappings for this. Okay. I think at the moment the integrations are going to run as soon as I did make an update to the naming convention. So where it's being captured for the naming convention for batch is, and where it's being held, is called the batch definition. And this batch definition is where we keep all the batch integrations. As you can see, there is the ones that was in the workflow tab where I was executing. This is where it runs specific data load rules, data loads. So as you can see, this is called an open batch, and this is called a data batch, okay? The difference is that an open batch, since SCME has a slight bug in it where it does not run multiple periods at one time. So we had to customize a script, and we call, actually it's actually here, where is it? So hypothetically, depreciation to planning. I created a script called the data integration pre-batch, which what it does is that when it runs, it knows how to reset the data and grab a new fresh period as well as a year. And that's why when you go into a workflow and you go into the process details, you'll see that if it runs on previously, it would run one integration or one period, and then it will try to bring in other periods, but then it stops. And that's where the error came into play. But at the moment, there's a bug behind that, so I did a workaround to not have that bug appear, and that's where we're actually getting the multiple periods that are coming in now with the script. Okay. So it goes around the issue, and we had fixed the problem. So now I think now that that problem is fixed, JP, all he needs to do is anytime prior to, or whoever is administering before you're running the nightly batch, automation batch, just go into the system location. We're going to go back into here, and we change this to system location as I had mentioned again. Okay, doesn't matter, you can leave. The only thing that is important is called the system location. And once that's done, you go into data load mapping, go into time control, and within the time control, change the parameters here, or change the variables, we call it. And you can run, so you can run, for each of the batch, it looks at these different periods, as you can see, okay? So, so let's say if you want to run depreciation for 6 months, you put it for January to June. And let's say if you want to run a head count for 3 months, you can put it in for August to October or something. And then it will run. It doesn't have to match up with periods. And what it does is that it will look into the system environment and it will pull specifically on periods, on those specific periods that you want. Okay? So to recap, JP's process calls the name on these batch names. So these are the batch names that he calls on. So when he executes his process, and I honestly don't know what his process is, he executes on this specific name. And once, so I'm assuming that every night or maybe during the nighttime, he refreshes the maps first before he refreshes the data, because the maps have to come before the data, right? So when that's done, then it goes through a sequence. I don't know if he has a time sequence or anything like that on there, or like a cron or a scheduler to run this.
I don't think anything's set up yet. This team is.
Well, I think he put something on. He put it up. I'm not sure it's fully. It's not like where you can run it. But, you know, it's not scheduled. So. No,
do you guys have any questions or any of that sort?
Not really.
I got a big one. When can I get some data in planning? And this is maybe a joint question, not to you.
Well, and this is a piece that Randy usually would do, and he had to he had to leave real quick. So, and we're all a little bit familiar with the FEE, but I think we wanted to see what was set up here, and that's kind of what this piece, like these little nuances.
But what I'm hearing is there's mappings that have to be
updated,
defined.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Randy will know the difference of his changes that has gone through, I think, between what you guys currently have in planning and what needs to be put. So I think he can identify those pretty quick.
Okay.
On fixes, those ones that that weren't checked, that need to go through, he has to do this. But I think from a go-forward process, I think he's going to be able to identify those changes pretty quickly and have a way to do it so it's a lot faster. So we just have to set those up.
Hardy, can you see if our depreciation is mapping okay, or does that one have errors too?
Same thing.
It's got same
errors. Yeah, they're probably.
Yeah, because the reason why we're pulling in the same mapping for, right, we're using the same tables to refresh the maps. So whether it is depreciation, ASO conduit to planning, or headcount, those three integrations are still pulling from the same location maps. Okay. So, I mean, not same location, sorry, wrong terminology, I'm going to correct myself. Same mappings. So at the end of the day, no matter what, DRM needs to refresh and push down from prod into dev in order for the mappings to come into FDME, because it's sharing. Let me show you. Okay, these are the three we're using. Okay, so these are the only three we're using. This is old. We had to separate. So eventually, Saravana provides the headcount consolidated as well. We put it all together under the account. And
okay, let me ask another question.
Yeah, so,
how do we point, or should we be pointing planning to DRM prod?
Well, first, well, that's going to be an update within the scripts. Okay, so I have to change the location and where to point.
We need to coordinate that and get that.
Yeah. So there's two ways, right? I mean, best practice-wise, from my perspective, is that we have a prod environment, we have a dev environment, right? You don't want to mix both environments together, and it becomes very hard to trace back and forth. That's from my point of view. In which I think that's pretty good practice, because then you have your sandbox and you have a production environment. And so that means that one, Saravana needs to have an environment, or at least another staging planning schema, or right within the production environment. That's number one. Number two is that he would need to refresh into those tables, which is under here. I don't know what he uses. It's a whole, I think, series of tables, how he joins certain things. And then there's a view that is created, which is for these three. Okay. So
this is just for Diane. She's had a lot going on this week. So I did put it in OSSR, Diane, to create another staging area for DRM dev. So the existing staging area is going to be used by DRM prod.
Well, I think there's some changes that are currently in the version that we'll have to merge and get into the dev, and then it could be dev for a while. The ones that we've done this month that Brian said yesterday.
Now we're talking about, we have one staging area right now being shared by dev and prod. We're going to create, you guys are going to create two. There's an OSSR.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. We just need to catch up, do the catch up on those two, even, from a development perspective. We need to catch up the dev to what's happened in production for this close. You know what I mean? So.
Okay. But what I'm hearing is what we need is in prod already. So why don't we just export prod and bring it in to planning?
From DRM, you're saying?
I'm not a DRM admin. Hardy, you have to help me a little bit.
So are you saying?
That's actually way out of my league. So how I think from how so the process I think with DRM is that it's out of sync at this moment, because I think Saravana, what he does is that when he pushes down from dev from dev into the DRM dev environment. But right at this moment, we're running against the production environment. So the mappings will need to go into another schema, which is we're going to have to create a new schema, which is another name. So I think for production, we'll need another staging planning in the production environment. And I think Saravana sent out an email last time about another DRM environment for or schema for the production area as well. So in this case, we can just pretty much do a lift and shift, and I just need to change the where it's pointing to.
Okay, so you need to change your scripts. Right now, you just have one script. So when we get two staging areas, you need two versions of the scripts, one for dev and one for prod.
That's correct. That is correct.
All right. I'll be quiet. Cecile, Sandeep, you guys have any questions? This is y'all's area.
No, we are good.
You guys going to help me get some data? All I want is data.
I understand, Steve, but there's a dependency on things, and we would like to jump over that hurdle as soon as the
No, you took care of your piece, Hardy. So thank you very much. I'll stop the recording.
Okay.